Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop letting someone have power over you, they suddenly change tactics? When a manipulator realizes you're no longer bending to their demands, they don't just give up, they adapt. And often, what comes next is far more twisted than what they tried before. It's like a spider weaving its web silently in the background, unnoticed by the fly that assumes it's safe, or a hunter lying low in the trees, simply waiting for the deer to let down its guard. That's exactly what they do. They pause, they smile, they act composed, but beneath the surface, they're already crafting their next strategy. Because when they can no longer control you directly, they'll shift their focus to controlling the narrative about you. Once their manipulation stops working, the decision becomes yours. Either fall into their traps again or rise above it. And it's when you rise that the real fear hits them. As soon as you stop relying on their validation, they start to regret ever trying to hold you down. Because your strength shines a light on everything they tried to keep hidden. So how do you spot the moment their manipulation crosses into something darker? And more importantly, how do you stop it from pulling you back in? Stick with me, because what you're about to discover might completely shift the way you respond from now on. Let's get into it. Number 1, they attempt to shame you in public. Let's start with one of the most deliberate and damaging moves manipulators make: public shaming. When they realize private control no longer works, this is what they resort to. This happens when they can't pull the strings behind closed doors anymore. When their guilt trips, gaslighting, or silent treatments lose their grip, they escalate the game, moving it from the shadows into the spotlight. They count on your fear of being mocked, judged, or embarrassed to bring you back in line. Here's the raw truth. When they fail in private, they try to control you through public humiliation. They can't sway you in one-on-one conversations anymore, so they go after your self-confidence in group settings. They'll mock your ideas in meetings, make jokes at your expense in front of others, subtly question your intelligence, loyalty, or competence, all within earshot. And when you confront them, they'll play innocent. Relax, I was just kidding, or you're reading into it too much. But deep down, you feel the sting. You notice the change. You know what they're doing, trying to shrink you in the eyes of others, since they couldn't succeed in shrinking you in your own. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your anchor. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth." Carl Jung added, "Shame is a soul-eating emotion." Together, these words remind us that the moment you value someone's public perception over your private truth, you hand them power over your peace. Shame only works when you believe it. But the truth is untouchable. It can't be destroyed by whispers or crowds. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Claire, once worked under a manager who tried every subtle trick in the book. He couldn't get to her one-on-one because she was too grounded, too self-aware. So he shifted tactics, started trying to humiliate her in front of others. In meetings, he'd cut her off mid-sentence, roll his eyes when she contributed, and once even said, "We should give Claire a trophy for staying late twice this month." Everyone laughed, but she felt the sting. Still, she didn't retaliate or shrink. She simply let the silence hang in the room and replied calmly, "Working late isn't a badge, it's a system failure." The room went quiet. She didn't try to shame him back, she simply stood her ground. And in that moment, everyone saw through him. So, how do you handle someone trying to publicly shame you? First, don't let it shake your sense of self-worth. Second, avoid the urge to lash out. Respond with calm clarity. And third, trust that truth eventually speaks for itself. You don't need to match their cruelty with noise. Just let your quiet strength be the loudest thing in the room. Because when shame no longer works, they lose a major part of their grip. Number 2, they play the victim. Let's look at one of the lowest tactics manipulators resort to when they've lost direct control: playing the victim. This starts when you stop giving in, when you begin setting boundaries, and when their guilt trips stop working on you. They realize you're no longer easy to influence, so they flip the entire script. Suddenly, you're the unreasonable one. You're the problem. And they're just the misunderstood, mistreated victim. They start spinning the story in such a way that people begin to doubt your intentions. Here's what's really happening. If you won't comply, they pretend you're the aggressor. It's not about honesty. It's about regaining control. They understand they've lost influence over you, so they try to win sympathy from everyone else. They present themselves as wounded, exaggerate the truth, and twist your firm boundaries into coldness or betrayal. All of it is designed with one purpose: to tear down your credibility and make you look like the villain. Because if they can't manipulate you anymore, they'll settle for manipulating how others perceive you. This is where Stoicism becomes a guide. Epictetus once said, "He who blames others has a long way to go on his journey." And whoever said, when someone can't manipulate you, they'll try to manipulate how others see you, understood exactly how this works. The Stoic approach doesn't involve trying to control how others view you. It's about mastering your reaction. When someone plays the victim to cast you as the enemy, remember, the truth doesn't have to shout, it just needs to stand. I'll share a story here. A woman I know, let's call her Lauren, was in a long-term relationship where she gave endlessly. But when she started setting healthy boundaries and choosing peace over people-pleasing, her partner didn't fight her. He started playing the victim. He told mutual friends, "I don't know what happened to Lauren. She's so distant now." He painted her growth as selfishness. But Lauren didn't run around explaining herself. She didn't rush to defend her name in every room. Instead, she focused on her healing, and with time, the people who mattered saw the truth for themselves. So how do you respond when someone turns themselves into the victim just to make you the villain? First, stay calm. Don't feed into the performance. Second, stand firm in your truth. You don't owe explanations to everyone. Let your actions speak. And third, don't shrink just because your strength makes someone else uncomfortable. Their story might be louder, but yours is real. And when someone has to lie just to make themselves look better, they've already lost their grip on the truth. Number 3, they begin spreading subtle lies. Let's dive into one of the most sneaky and cowardly strategies manipulators rely on when their control slips: spreading quiet, subtle lies. These aren't bold accusations or outright fabrications. No, these lies are artfully crafted, carefully twisted versions of the truth that imply things you never actually said or did. Instead of calling you a bad person outright, they might say something like, "I don't know. Something just seems off about them lately." They won't accuse you directly. Instead, they'll drop suggestive comments and let others carry the suspicion forward. That's the trick. They're planting seeds and hoping others will water them. Here's what's really going on. Now that they can't shape how you see yourself, they turn their focus towards shaping how others see you. This isn't just manipulation anymore, it's sabotage. They want to slowly unravel your reputation. They want to isolate you, make people question your motives, your character, and your credibility. And they don't need evidence to do that. All they need is enough whispers, enough hesitation, enough perfectly timed silence in the right rooms. This is where Stoic clarity becomes your North Star. Seneca once said, "The truth is simple. Lies require complication." Mark Twain added, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes." That's exactly how this tactic functions, manipulating how quickly rumors spread versus how slowly the truth builds. But the Stoic doesn't panic. They don't chase down every piece of gossip. They understand that while the truth might take longer to arrive, it stands taller, and it holds. Let me share a story. A guy I know, we'll call him Eric, worked at a company where a colleague asked him to cut corners on a project. Eric refused. It didn't sit well with that colleague. Over the next few weeks, whispers started to float around the office. Eric's being really territorial, or I've heard he's tough to collaborate with. These things were never said to his face. They just hung in the air like smoke. But Eric didn't spiral. He didn't go room to room trying to clean up the narrative. He stayed consistent. He kept doing good work. He honored his boundaries. And with time, the people who paid attention could see the truth for themselves. The lies faded, because the truth, it's patient, and it always outlasts a weak story. So, how do you handle someone who's distorting reality around you? First, resist the urge to chase down every rumor. That's part of their trap. Second, let your actions speak louder than your defense. And third, trust that time exposes what intentions try to bury. Because anyone who needs to lie about you in order to feel powerful already knows the truth favors you. Let them complicate the story. You? Keep living simply, honestly, and boldly. The truth doesn't need to scream, it just needs to endure. Number 4. They work to isolate you. Now let's explore one of the most carefully orchestrated moves manipulators make: isolating you. But it's not about physically removing you from your environment. It's more subtle, more psychological. They begin by planting quiet doubts in the minds of those around you. Your coworkers, your friends, maybe even family. A loaded comment here, a vague concern there. At first, it barely registers. But little by little, the mood shifts. Energy changes. People start pulling away, and they may not even realize why. Here's the truth behind this tactic. When they start losing their grip on you directly, they try to cut you off from your support system. Because the fewer connections you have, the more fragile you feel, and the easier it becomes to manipulate you. Isolation weakens your resolve. It makes you question your own perception. You wonder why the room feels colder, why people you used to laugh with now feel distant. But this move isn't about fairness or facts. It's about gaining power. And one of the quickest paths to control is to make someone feel completely alone. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your armor. Seneca once said, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." On the flip side, Machiavelli, from a more strategic lens, made it clear: control the narrative and you control the person. And that's what manipulators do. They don't just want others to view you differently. They want you to start seeing yourself through that distorted lens too. Let me tell you about someone. We'll call her Jenna. She was part of a tight-knit team, respected and valued. But when she started asserting herself, setting limits, and standing up to unrealistic demands, one teammate, feeling threatened, started whispering. Comments like, "Jenna's been intense lately," or "she's kind of hard to talk to now." Just enough to tilt the energy. Meetings began to feel different. People backed off. But Jenna didn't react emotionally. She didn't go into panic mode. She kept showing up with integrity, kept contributing, and eventually, people started noticing the whispers didn't match the reality. The strategy fell apart. So how do you protect yourself when someone tries to isolate you? First, become aware of the pattern. Name it before it works. Second, double down on consistency and integrity. Your actions are proof they can't rewrite. Third, invest deeply in the few people who truly reflect your values. You don't need everyone, just a few who truly see you. Because isolation is built on illusion, and those meant to walk with you won't fall for cheap stories. Stay rooted, stay real, and let the truth outlive the whisper campaign. Number 5, they use guilt to make you comply. Let's take a closer look at one of the most emotionally draining tactics in a manipulator's toolkit. Guilt. When reason doesn't work, when open dialogue doesn't go their way, and when they realize control is slipping through their fingers, they don't argue with logic. They dive straight into your empathy. They aim for your conscience. It sounds like, "After everything I've done for you," or "I guess none of it mattered, huh?" It's not rooted in love. It's not about fairness. It's emotional blackmail. A weapon carefully designed to make you feel ashamed for having your own boundaries, needs, or voice. Here's the reality. They lean on guilt because they know it works. They don't have to yell. They don't have to make a dramatic scene. Just a sigh, a look of disappointment, or a loaded comment is enough to make you second-guess yourself. They know you care. They know you're kind. And instead of valuing those traits, they exploit them. The next thing you know, you're apologizing for things you shouldn't be sorry for. You're doing favors you don't want to do. You're giving and giving until you're empty, all to avoid making them feel bad. But the truth is, if someone genuinely cared about you, they wouldn't use your compassion against you. They'd protect it. This is where Stoicism helps you find your strength again. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And someone else once put it just as powerfully, "Guilt is a weapon used by those too weak to lead, yet too afraid to be left behind." When guilt is used this way, it's not about resolution or love. It's about domination. If they can't guide you through honesty, they'll try to steer you through shame. Let me tell you about a woman I know. We'll call her Danielle. She had a family member, an aunt, who always used guilt as a lever. When Danielle decided to take a job out of state to pursue her dreams, the response wasn't, "That's amazing." It was, "I guess family doesn't mean much to you anymore." When Danielle couldn't make it to every gathering or fulfill every request, she'd hear, "Wow, after all I've done for you." And it worked, for a while. Danielle kept saying yes when she wanted to say no. She kept stretching herself thin just to avoid disappointing someone who only measured love through sacrifice. But one day, Danielle stopped. She paused and asked herself one question: would I ever speak to someone I love the way she speaks to me? The answer was no. That moment changed everything. Danielle stopped reacting from guilt and started responding from self-respect. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful, and it set her free. So how do you deal with someone who uses guilt to manipulate you? First, recognize the script. This isn't care, it's control dressed in concern. Second, before you react, ask yourself, am I doing this out of desire or out of fear? That question alone will shift your response. And third, set boundaries with clarity, not cruelty. You don't owe your peace to anyone, especially not someone who's trying to guilt you into surrendering it. Because guilt only holds power when you believe you've done something wrong. And protecting your time, your energy, and your truth, that's not wrong, that's wisdom. Number 6, they try to destroy your confidence. Now let's talk about one of the most damaging tactics a manipulator turns to when all else has failed: the calculated attempt to erode your confidence. This isn't just about winning an argument or getting the upper hand in a moment. It's a deeper, more intentional effort. It's slow, it's strategic, and it's layered in subtleties. It might look like casual jabs, veiled sarcasm, or questions disguised as concern. Things like, "Are you sure that's a smart move?" Or, "Wow, you're really going with that?" It starts small, so small you might brush it off. But over time, it chips away at your self-trust. Here's what's really happening. Since they can't control you directly anymore, they try to make you question your own worth. They want you to second-guess your judgment, to hesitate when you once led boldly, to come back seeking their validation. Not because they earned it, but because they made you believe you couldn't stand on your own. If they can shake your foundation, they don't have to push. You'll retreat all on your own. And that's their goal. Not to lift you up, but to break you just enough so you'll come crawling back, quietly, uncertainly. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Naval Ravikant said something just as piercing. The first step in silencing a strong mind is convincing it that it's broken. That's exactly what they're trying to do. Convince you that your voice, your intuition, your clarity is flawed. But it's not. It's just threatening to someone who never developed their own. Let me share a story. There was a guy I knew, let's call him Chris. He was in a long-term relationship where every time he succeeded, his partner found a way to minimize it. When he landed a promotion, she said, "Must be nice to know the right people." When he made a decision for himself, she'd say, "Are you sure you've thought that through?" Over time, Chris changed. He became quieter, less certain. The once confident, decisive version of him started to fade, until one day a friend said something simple: "You've changed, and not in a good way." That was his wake-up call. He realized this wasn't growth, it was erosion, and he decided to walk away. It wasn't easy, but every step forward helped him rebuild the voice that had been buried under doubt. So what do you do when someone tries to dismantle your confidence? First, recognize the intent behind their words. Their remarks aren't random, they're designed to disarm. Second, protect your mental space. Start writing things down, your wins, your strengths, your values, and revisit them often. And third, surround yourself with people who remind you of your truth, not your fear. Confidence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from knowing who you are, even when someone else tries to make you forget. Don't let their insecurity become your self-image. Reclaim your voice. Remember your strength. And above all, never surrender what they couldn't earn in the first place. Number 7. They offer fake reconciliation. Let's talk about one of the most deceptive, last resort moves a manipulator makes once they've exhausted every other tactic. The illusion of reconciliation. This is their final play, the soft re-entry, the moment when they shift their tone completely. Suddenly, they're kind again, calm, even remorseful. You'll hear phrases like, "I've been doing a lot of thinking," or I miss how things used to be. And at first it feels genuine, like maybe, just maybe, they've changed. But beneath that new softness lies the same intention, control. They don't return to make amends, they come back to reset the board. Here's the truth. When all their other attempts to regain control fail, the guilt, the shaming, the rumors, they switch strategies. Now they play nice. Not to rebuild something healthy, but to slip past your guard. They want back in, not to grow, not to heal, but to pick up where they left off, only smarter, more subtle, more calculated this time. They'll mirror your growth, they'll say the right things. They'll even admit fault, not because they feel it, but because they know it's what you need to hear. And if you let them in too quickly, the cycle starts all over again. Slowly, then suddenly, the old patterns re-emerge, wrapped in new words, but driven by the same core agenda. This is where Stoic clarity becomes vital. Epictetus once said, "He who does not observe deceit is not truly wise." And there's another quote that cuts even deeper. Be careful who you let back in. The snake only sheds its skin to grow larger. That's what you need to remember. Wisdom isn't about holding grudges. It's about recognizing patterns. A softer tone doesn't always mean a softer heart. Sometimes it's just strategy, dressed in sincerity. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Naomi, had broken off a relationship with someone who drained her emotionally for years. She went no contact, focused on healing, took her time, and started to find peace. Then months later, he resurfaced, apologetic, vulnerable, saying he'd started therapy, saying he finally understood. Naomi was cautious, but hopeful. She let him in, slowly. For a while, things seemed different. He was attentive, thoughtful, measured. But then came the passive jabs, the guilt-laced comments, the subtle power plays, and it hit her. Nothing had really changed. He hadn't evolved, he'd just adapted. So how do you respond when someone offers reconciliation that feels too perfectly timed? First, take your time. Real change doesn't rush. It reveals itself through consistency, not performance. Second, look at what they do, not what they say. Are they truly respecting your boundaries now, or just testing their limits in new ways? And third, ask yourself the hard question. Do I genuinely want this person back in my life, or am I just drawn to the version they're pretending to be? That one question can save you months, even years of emotional detours. At the end of the day, not every apology deserves an open door. Forgive if it brings you peace. But don't forget the pattern that made you close that door in the first place. Because when someone shows you, again and again, who they really are, the wise thing to do isn't to hope they'll change. It's to believe them and walk away stronger, clearer, and free. What are your views on this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.